All right, we're back. My good friend Flip, uh, who I've known since college days, and we share common interest in trips to Australia, though Flip definitely has lived there for years. I've only visited, uh, but anxious to hear you tell your story about your amazing work, which I'm not sure that I would have the courage to do. As a volunteer firefighter in all the mountain states trying to save our forests. So my thanks to you, Flip, for the incredible work that you do saving our forests. Please.
Thank you, Carl. Those are very kind words. It also could be that rather than being brave, I'm just insane. So I'll leave that to you all to judge. Do I have control here? Yeah, I guess I do. So let's see if I can actually get this to happen. Yeah. Can you see this full screen?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Okay, very good. Thank you. Because now I can't see you guys at all. All I see is my screen in front of me. So I'd like to let you guys in on a little secret. Maybe it shouldn't be a secret, but I think it is. There's a universe parallel to the one where most of us live, and that's at least in my worldview. And this is the universe of emergency services. There are people who are among you, who help you when you need help, but for the most part, we're invisible. The airlines call active service duty members to get on board early. They don't say anything about the emergency service people who are, frankly, in harm's way a hell of a lot more often than those in the military. But that aside, we do work that I think is important. I got to it rather late in my life, but it's some of the best work that I've honestly ever done. And I'm delighted to be able to do it. It's frankly an honor. What you're seeing in the background in this picture is the quarry fire, which happened in Colorado earlier this year in the summer. I was away on another fire in Idaho, so I did not work this one. The trees that you see down below are about 75 feet tall. These are big flames. And this is the sort of thing that happens in the Rockies and in California and all across the West on a very regular basis. And it's scary stuff. But it's made more scary when you have organizational entities that are not actually that are meant to help you that don't help you. So I'd like to speak a little bit about that. This talk is entitled "Holding Their Feet to Our Fires." It is a tale of rural emergency services and the struggle that we have to serve in the face of ignorance and corruption. I'll come back and define corruption because it's not what most people think of as corruption. Since this may not be obvious, I am a professor at the Colorado School of Mines, and I'm a professional firefighter in two fire protection districts in Colorado: Elk Creek Fire, which is southwest of Denver, and another place called Hartsel Fire, which is in the middle of Park County, which is the actual honest to God South Park. Um, Hartsel Fire is 100% volunteer, with the exception of one or two senior. Um, the chief is paid. Everybody else volunteers. Elk Creek is a so-called combination fire protection district, meaning that some people, about a third, are paid to do this work. They have a regular schedule. And then the rest of us volunteer to pick up the load and balance it, and also to help when we get absolutely slammed by incidents, because as I'll tell you in a minute, we don't just do fire. So a few introductory thoughts. Change is coming. It's kind of inevitable. You either can help shape that change or you risk getting crushed by it. You may also not get crushed by it. But the shaping itself, in my opinion, should be based upon thoughtful consideration of facts, not simply on reflexive emotions. I'm not downplaying emotion, but I would like most of the things that we're doing here around emergencies, at least, to be fact-based. I also recommend listening to experts, especially when they're offering their public services and perspective for the public good, and especially when they do so for free. So I don't get paid more or less by telling you what I think is the truth. Others may have a more vested interest in telling you certain things, but I don't, because you can have my salary, I still get zero. So, and you also should ask yourself why anyone, and I mean anyone, would be opposed to greater public safety. Raise your hand here if you would like to be less safe in an emergency situation, please. I can't think of anybody. Take up jumping out of airplanes with parachutes or bungee jumping or anything if you really need more thrills in your life, but do you really want to be torched in a fire? Probably not. Or have nobody around when you have a heart attack? Probably not also. So in the background are myself and my colleagues. You may see me peeking out between some of the letters, but I want to provide you some context for what I'm about to tell you. So emergency services, these include fire, rescue, medical, and law enforcement, are needed throughout the United States and not only in our cities. This is not just a US thing, this is international, but I only really know the US context. In rural areas, services, with the exception of law enforcement, are often provided by so-called fire departments, and these are largely staffed by volunteers. These departments are very expensive to run. If you're in the fire business and you have a rescue vehicle, a rescue pumper vehicle, those things run from between now 800,000 and $1 million too. And you're only allowed to use them for so many years, and then you have to replace them. So the capital expenses here are large, and when you have paid firefighters, that's also a huge expense as well. In Colorado, most of our fire departments are now organized as so-called fire protection districts, or FPDs. They are organized under Colorado statute, and they are allowed, with the concurrence of the citizenry served, to levy taxes on property within their boundaries. We can't just do it arbitrarily, but the taxpayers have to agree to do this. And some are happy about that, and some are less happy. There is usually one or more fire chief who provides operational oversight of each fire protection district. And on top of that, there's an elected board of directors that oversee the fire protection district funds. These are, after all, tax funds. So somebody should be watching them. And in other places, there have been cases of abuse, people pocketing money that was not theirs. To my knowledge, that has never happened in either of my fire protection districts. The fire chiefs are also overseen by the board of directors. They hire and fire the chief. And the boards also assist in setting the fire protection district's strategic direction. And this has been a source of some headache and heartache for us that we'll go over here in a moment. So the problem is that management oversight, which is, after all, the director's role, requires either prior knowledge of the subject matter or a willingness to learn it on the job. There are, I have a business degree and a bunch of other degrees as well, but the business program that I attended showed me very clearly that a manager can only manage what he or she understands. And as I said, you can come with that prior knowledge, or you can learn it on the job, which is a slower process. There are some schools of thought that believe that a manager is a manager and can manage anything. I believe that's a crock. And I can show you empirical evidence if it's important. Elections in the US, even if it's for positions that should be apolitical, like boards of directors overseeing public safety, have now become microcosms of national politics. And all of the ugliness that this entails is reflected, unfortunately, on the board that oversees the workings of my departments. And it's percolated down to school boards, for everyone's sake. So it's in everything we do. I find this a tragedy, but it's the truth. Those who are attracted to be a director on such a board include two extremes. At one extreme, you have experienced persons who seek to understand and to foster the common good. At the other extreme, you have corrupt political hacks who have no interest in learning what they're supposed to be overseeing, and they have no prior knowledge of it, but they believe that they somehow spontaneously have mastered the subject, so everything that they say is true. This is frankly a dangerous situation. Let me make a little side note here on what I mean by corruption. I'm not talking about people taking money and putting it in their pocket. I'm talking about moral corruption here. People who basically put obstacles in the way of people who are trying to help others, and doing so, in most cases, quite selflessly. Elk Creek Fire Protection District, which is southwest of Denver in the Front Range of the Rockies, has both types of directors on its board. And the latter type, the type that is highly political and, in my opinion, corrupt, has created many recent problems that are endangering everyone. That includes the firefighters, and that includes the population served. And this has potential fatal consequences if it goes wrong. So let me give you a few specifics about the problems. These directors, at least the corrupt ones, use their positions to promote their own agendas, which are not the agenda of the general population being served that elected them, and usually have nothing to do with the fire protection district's work in the first place. For instance, preventing changes such as by development within the district. We're 35 minutes from downtown Denver. We don't look like a suburb as you think of suburbs in the east, but effectively we are a suburb. And that means that people are going to want to move here, especially in times such as during the pandemic. There was a huge influx of folks. This makes pressure on development. It's going to happen. Not everybody's happy about that. Elk Creek does have real issues that it must address. The first is that we have increasing numbers and acuity of incidents, and the costs to handle them keep going up. Our population is aging, and as a result of this, that we have more and more severe cases of a medical sort. I should mention, and will mention here, that basically my fire protection district answers any 911 call, not straight up law enforcement. So if you're having problems, if your house is being burglarized, we will not show up. But if you're being hurt in the process of the burglary, we will be there, much as we'll be there for any fire, any accident, any backcountry rescue, and any medical emergency in general. So we draw more greatly on mutual aid from neighboring fire protection districts than we offer in return. Mutual aid is basically a prior agreement, contractual, where usually with a neighboring district, if you need help, you ask for help and help comes, though not always quickly. So we are effectively being subsidized by our neighbors. We are overseeing fire safety in one of the reddest of the red wildland urban interfaces. What's a wildland urban interface? It's basically where we as human beings have encroached in forests and built homes. And because of the way we've maintained our forests for the last century and a quarter, it's not a safe thing to do casually. The federal government rates the fire risk, the wildland fire risk, of all of the regions of the U.S., and we are in the 99th percentile of risk of having a big fire where we live. It's not a matter of whether it'll happen. It's a question of when it'll happen, where precisely it will happen, and how well prepared we are when it does. So we are fundamentally one call away from catastrophe. And some of us take this seriously, and some of us don't. So red herring tasks such as thwarting development, which some directors want to do, basically dilute our true tasks and detract from meeting our actual responsibilities. So a solution was proposed last year, a process that has a legal definition known as consolidation. So the chiefs of 3 fire protection districts, including mine, with the support of their members, and I'm a member, and majority support of their boards, proposed combining their districts as a practical way forward. How does this improve things? It reduces overhead, it streamlines processes, the mutual aid thing kind of goes away because you're all called out for all incidents. At least you're aware of them and know when to come. It also would have increased the tax base and allowed the hiring of more full-time career firefighters. They would not take my place because they still need volunteers, but there'd be more people available around the clock because I'm not, sometimes I go to bed and go to sleep, as do my volunteer colleagues. So this consolidation would have raised property taxes slightly, and consequently, it met with immediate resistance that was fomented by one underinformed and frankly uninformable member of Elk Creek's board of directors and his special interest cronies. I say this with love and respect, but like me, they are of retirement age or beyond. And I'm not entirely sure what motivates them, but their answer to everything that involves change is no. So this one director acted in violation of the bylaws of his own board, for which he was formally sanctioned by his fellow board members, but that was a bit like beating him with a feather. And he, in fact, has said in writing that he views this sanction as a badge of honor. So what exactly did they do? They founded an organization which they entitled Save Elk Creek Fire, and they further confused the electorate by co-opting the fire department's trademarked logo. And when they were slapped with a cease and desist order, they basically said, oh no, this is fair use and this is about freedom of speech and we're going to do what we want anyway, so sue us, which we opted not to do. It was too late and was going to be too expensive. I think that was a tactical error, but that's my opinion. These individuals spread misinformation and disinformation about the consequences of consolidation and called these inventions facts, thus spreading fear. They said that your response times would go up. We don't believe that. We thought they would go down and can, I think, prove that pretty definitively. They said that resources would be moved around, so what you were accustomed to would no longer be available. They also violated election laws, and consequently they were fined. A further and more serious case rests with the county district attorney, but I'm not overly confident that that'll ever move forward. They stole pro-consolidation yard signs and banners repeatedly. They refused to debate issues, which is a common tactic in American politics. Again, speaking to your siloed echo chamber of fellow thinkers. So there's really no discourse, which I think is more than unfortunate in the United States. It's downright shameful. They engaged in vitriolic personal smear campaigns against the department that was being overseen and the chiefs who run all three of them. We were told in a board meeting that we who fight the fires and drive the ambulances and rescue people in the backcountry were, quote, not heroes. We were despicable. Why were we despicable? Because we took to task this board member who had done the things that I've listed above. And he started by taking on a citizen as well. So it wasn't just the firefighters who were despicable, it was the citizenry as well. So a citizens group was created to counter these naysayers, but we frankly started too late and we're always on the defensive. It's hard to score points on defense. It happens, but not very efficiently. We also were unwilling to counter their dirty tricks with more dirt. So here are the voiced criticisms of consolidation. There was a lack of strategy, which is a total red herring. There was a strategy, but I think most of these people who complained have a very different idea of what strategy is than I do, and I have formal training in the subject. So what they wanted was basically operational detail. There would be an increase in property taxes. This is true. There would have been an increase in property taxes, but this would have been de minimis. For the average house in district, it would have been the equivalent of 3 cups of coffee a month. There was a loss of local political agency that was feared. This is a total red herring because it's not that you are no longer in control of what's happening in your vicinity. It's that the vicinity is now bigger. You're actually controlling a much larger area. The change in role for individual fire stations was also a concern, as I mentioned earlier. This is an operational detail, which, in my opinion, Your opinion is welcome. We want to hear what your concern is. We even want to hear what your idea is. But the control of the outcome is none of your blessed business if you're a citizen. That's why you have a fire department. You've delegated this work to us. Please let us do our job. And those of you who are old enough probably remember the INF negotiations between then President Reagan and his Soviet counterparts. And during those, Mr. Reagan utilize a Russian proverb, which we've translated into English as trust but verify. These people's approach is distrust and vilify, which is in no means constructive. So what was the outcome of consolidation? I've kind of hinted at it already. All three of the fire protection districts had to pass their equivalent ballot measures in order for consolidation to occur. And while the overall electorate of the three fire protection districts voted in favor of these ballot measures by 54% overall, only Elk Creek's rejected theirs by 0.36%, which means exactly 45 votes out of the 5,374 ballots cast. So consolidation fails. So emergency services continue to limp along, having the same problems as before, but the structural challenges remain. The question is, what do we do about it? And you can see smoke in the background. That's the sort of thing that we work with all the time, and we take care of, in my case, for free. So why was there such a fuss made by those that I'm calling corrupt here? I honestly, they have never told me or anyone else that I'm aware of. I'm not even sure that they know why they're fussing, but my postulate, or I postulate that there are two main issues. One is that they view the world as a zero-sum game. And the second is that if this had passed, it would be a threat to local politicians who have access to grind. So on the zero-sum game side of things, the view is if a service is provided by my district to a neighbor, this threatens the availability of this service when it's needed in my district, or more, without saying it, when I need it. And we're not going to park ambulances in the driveways of all of these concerned citizens. It's just not practical. So the question is, how widely do you share, and from how far afield do you then need to bring help? 1/3 roughly of the calls that we have are simultaneous, meaning that we don't have one call at a time. We have at least two, oftentimes three. 5 is not unusual. In one 24-hour period, we had 27 calls, 27 incidents of fire and medicine that required us to act. We basically don't have the staff to do what is required of us. Consolidation would have reduced the total number of board of directors positions in this aggregated region from 15, 5 in each of the three, to 5, only 2 of whom would have been from Elk Creek. And the main agent fighting consolidation likely would lose his position and therefore his platform for his apparent favorite cause, his favorite axe to grind, which is stasis and negation of any and all change. So when public service and safety are at the mercy of having a local political playground for the power hungry, something is really very wrong, but it's not something that can be easily ignored either. So what's a citizen to do? Our citizens group, which included about 30 strong across the 3 fire protection districts, but more heavily weighted towards Elk Creek, where the obvious political opposition was, we held what we call an after-action review in the fire service. In other places, these are called post-mortems. You take basically a look at what went well and what went poorly during whatever that's being evaluated. And we highlighted the following needs for any next time to address this issue, however it was done. The first was to protect and defend the use of the fire protection district logo from rogue users. Every intellectual property lawyer with whom I've spoken about what they did said that that was not fair use. So 2, that it is we who should define the field of play and the issues involved from the beginning. Don't be playing reaction, be acting from the get-go. 3, mechanically, we need to reach out directly via our personal networks and public fora rather than just through social media and websites, which is how it worked last time, and it didn't work as well as hoped. Although I'm convinced that if the electorate hadn't been as confused as it clearly was from anecdotal evidence, this measure would have passed, because the voters thought that the people saying that Elk Creek needed to be saved were Elk Creek. So they basically voted against the measure that Elk Creek wanted done. And by state law, the department itself is not permitted to campaign during elections, which seems a little silly to me, but that's the law. So they can say what they want, and we cannot. So the fourth item is to expose dirty tricks immediately when they occur. And the fifth is to provide a detailed strategic plan to the populace. And in the fullness of time, a strategic plan was formulated. This plan was presented to the board. It gathered virtually no objections, or for that matter, comments, which is another reason I think the strategic plan issue was from the get-go a red herring. A smaller group of citizens from Elk Creek, originally 4 of us, now 8, agreed that we needed to provide a constructive force for any next move. Calling ourselves and patterning ourselves after Carl's group, we called ourselves the Guardians of Sanity, or at least I did. And we emphasize fact, truth, and prefer affirmative messaging whenever possible. Sometimes that proves very difficult, even impossible. And we do our best to act below the radar. I don't think the other side even knows we're out there. We're mostly concerned citizens within the district, but we also include volunteers from the fire department, including yours truly. And all of us have what we believe is the greater good in mind. We can argue about what the greater good is, but I can tell you that the other side does not have that in mind. We're helping support a new approach to combining the fire protection districts, and this scaling up, I think, really is the only option that we have. And the associated streamlining that is needed. This process, again, it has legal definition. It's called unification. It looks a lot like consolidation, but with a twist. So unification does not require voter approval. It does require board of director approval and legal approval by the county, but it results in fact, lower taxes for Elk Creek and for one of the other fire protection districts, and because we are matching the lowest of the property tax rates related to fire protection and emergency services. So that district won't see any change in its, but the other two will go down. This unification has been formally proposed by the 3 fire chiefs and is currently under review by their respective boards of directors. Preliminary indications for unification remain encouraging, but the opposition is crying foul and starting its campaign of craziness. Crying foul because they said, we already voted on this last November, and we said no. And the people have spoken, and that's the end of the story. Why are you doing this? And my counter to that in Supreme Court-esque fashion is no. What we brought before the electorate was an option to combine our departments with an increase in taxes. That's not what this is. And we'll see how this plays out. It's playing out in real time as we speak. Stay tuned. Our guardians are organizing informational meetings for the public and making clear the wide support this has among those of us who serve, as well as the general public. So I am assembling basically signatures on a petition showing who in each of the 3 fire protection districts is in support of this action. I know of no one who is not, but we will publish this in the local newspaper. We will read it into the record at the next board meeting. And it will be, I think, clear that the people who actually know what they're talking about on the subject matter all think that this is the right thing to do. And again, please listen to your topical experts rather than the uninformed political hacks. If certain parties run for election or re-election in this new board, though, we may have to be a lot less gentle than we've been so far. So why do we do this work? Well, first of all, we get to work with some really big and cool toys, like a helicopter on the left and the water tender on the right. Water tender is probably a concept foreign to those of you who live in urban areas. We live in a rural area. We don't have fire hydrants. We have to bring our water to the fire. That's what this device on the right does. It's fun to drive. The other reason we do this work is that we have wildlife that we're trying to take care of and forests that we're trying to take care of. These pictures were both taken in my yard, so we have some large and small predators where I live in Conifer, Colorado. But the real reason we do this is we care about the people who are there. This is my little friend Oliver, who came dressed in his own bunker gear to the fire station, and my wife and our dog. And peeking out just barely in the upper right is Pikes Peak. And the other reason we do it is that people actually thank us now and again. Even if the board of directors or certain members of the board are not particularly friendly towards us, nor I might add, am I towards them. The populace in general gets it. And when you live in fire country, you develop an appreciation for the work that these people do. And whether you get paid to do it or don't get paid to do it, it's still hard work. It's dangerous work. We basically put our lives on the line, usually for people we don't know from Adam. And we also help in hurricane cleanup. And I gather as things are evolving here in the US, there's going to be a lot of that. That's me on the left, although this is a hurricane in the Bahamas that I helped clean up for another classmate of Carl's and mine. And we do it because the area is really, really pretty, and we like to keep it that way. I would welcome your questions if you have any.
Well, thank you again, Flip. Again, I salute your courage. I would, in fighting fires and cleanup work after hurricanes. I'd also like to salute your very matter of fact, tell it like it is. Here's the problem. Let's figure out what we can and cannot do and find a solution to the problem. Um, I think you've done a great job of putting together your story in a matter of fact way. That it's not extremify or polarize or get carried away with hyperbole. It just tells the story, and you tell it in a manner that is very calm and rational and matter of fact. How can you be against the safety of the community, the safety for the common good of your neighbors, and yet uh,
It happens.
and yet it happens. And so these are the questions that we need to study. These are the questions we need to explore. And so since we still have Maggie here, I will actually call out to Maggie. Maggie, do you have any hypotheses why someone would be so resistant to serving the greater good in support of volunteer firefighters like Flip?
Um, well, I'm professionally bound that I can only talk in generalities.
Of course, of
Not
course,
about
of
people that I've
course.
never seen.
There's no HIPAA violation possible here, Maggie. I'm not a client of yours, so
Yeah, no, I
so.
know, but I mean, you're not allowed to, like, that's why psychologists aren't
We're
allowed
not
to,
diagnosing. We're not
exactly, aren't allowed to come
discussing
out and say what they
particulars
really
of
think
named
about
persons. So we're good to
political
discuss
camp.
concepts in general.
Right. I think power is addictive, frankly, and it's very hard for people to um, experience their power being diminished, be it by, you know, being voted out of office, by aging, um, whatever the forces may be, by, no longer having a position that is part of where the culture is going. And so I think when people feel threatened, they, in the mistakes were made by me, they double down idea, and then it's all bets are off. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but the examples they gave were like some very famous things that had happened in a daycare situation, like the Charles Stewart case here in Boston, when the police were convinced they had the they rounded up likely suspects in the black section of Boston, and in fact, it was the husband who killed his pregnant wife, and um, it took so long and so much to get them to retrace because they came out so far in one direction in the beginning, um, that they didn't want to admit their mistakes. So I think when people are kind of at the end of a limb, they don't know how to walk themselves back. And my guess is that's where this went to very quickly. That, as you said earlier, all rationality went out the window. And um, even though you were telling people you helped them, that isn't the part they were paying attention to.
Right, and then there were funny little eddies in the narrative as given by the other side. They basically teed it up as a David and Goliath,
Mhm.
citizenry against the big bad mean union, because those who are career in this business are unionized. And the antagonist was very much, whom I've not named, you might notice, uh, is very much anti-union. And I'm not a union apologist, but for dangerous work, I understand why there's a union, and this is dangerous work. Trust me. Um, yeah, the other thing, and no, I'm seemingly calm, and I think I'm reasonably calm on this topic at the moment, folks. But I can tell you that during election time, as lies were piling up, and during public comment periods of the board of directors each month leading up to the election, and definitely for the month or two that followed, I was not gentle, and I was not calm, and I basically pointed out what was being done, and that was not welcome.
Mhm.
So, but I basically got to what I call my Popeye point, where I could stanz it until I couldn't stanz it no more.
Mhm.
And it's not like that I invented stuff, but I just didn't feel it appropriate to be silent or to
Mhm.
dissimulate. So I called this SOB out on what he'd done, and he was not happy
Mhm.
about it. I will also point out that he assaulted people in the fire station. I mean, he's not a nice, happy man. And in many ways, I alternate between reviling him and pitying the heck out of him, because um, what must his life be like in order for this to be the source of his joy? It's sad and
Yeah, but
disturbing.
let me say one thing to that point, which I think is a truism, another kind of truism that I believe is, just because something is understandable doesn't
Doesn't
make it
make it right.
doesn't make it acceptable. I wouldn't use right or wrong here. I would use
Fair enough.
acceptable. I
Yeah.
think I think we have lost that. We go so deep on the understanding part, and again, kind of in that, every kid gets a trophy culture thing, but there really are acceptable and unacceptable ways of living in a civilized society. And so we can understand till the cows come home, but we still can expect a certain level of acceptable behavior. And we've lost that. And it's trickled down it both bubbled up from the bottom, and it's also trickled down from the top in our culture right now. And I think people are really emboldened to be incredibly uncivil. And it's makes for scary times.
Well, I will admit that I was not civil during these discourses during the board,
Yeah.
and I own that. But it was my incivility in reaction to somebody else's incivility. So where do you break the process? Because
Mhm.
it was clear that silence was not our friend, because they basically control the airwaves and fill it with lies. So
Mhm.
do you say, hey, you're controlling the airwaves and filling it with lies, and here's the truth, or do you just sit there quietly and meekly? Uh, it's
Mhm.
it's I still struggle with this, even now, and I think we have another fight coming up over this modified approach to combining our departments. And honest to goodness, I fully expect to get sued. Not me personally, but I expect the department is going to get sued, um, or worse. So there's been no physical violence. I'm glad to be able to say that. That would certainly not be in my book, with the exception, as I said, of the assaults that this man
Mhm.
actually did in the fire station. But
But Flip,
yeah,
if I can respond to that, because certainly that's an obligation that I've had to fulfill over the years in emergency services, um, for DSDO, GD behavior, DS danger to self, danger to other, GD grave disability. I mean, you know, we always advise folks, the moment there's physical violence involved, just call the police. So I'm curious, if your opponent actually committed assault in the fire department, did anybody call the police and press charges?
um, I think the short answer is no. I was not a witness to this, but there were witnesses, and I think it was. I don't know why none was called, but I made a very vocal point that we needed to have a sheriff at these meetings going forward, and we did that for several meetings, because I wasn't the only person demanding this, because we had members of the public who were effectively intimidated by this, so intimidated by this behavior they refused to come. you know
Mhm.
and these are public fora, for heaven's sake. They're for
Well,
the public.
yeah. So
So
whoever was present at that incident of violence, if they're willing and able to file the complaint, press charges, and the statute of limitations has not expired, it may be an appropriate thing to do to send a message to that opponent, that if he behaves that manner, yeah, charges will be pressed. Charges
so
can be pressed.
okay, put this into your Lewis Carroll world, my friend.
I'm sorry.
His claim, I giving away the gender, I'm sorry. His claim was that he was assaulted in the corridors. There were at least two witnesses that say exactly the opposite. He was assaulted and he pressed charges.
Oh my goodness. I mean, this is all the problem that we have in today's world with gaslighting. And, it's gaslighting of the gaslighting of the gaslighting.
Mhm.
And we are going to have some mention of DARVO in one of our talks today. And of course, DARVO is the acronym for deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. So who's the victim and who's the actual offender? And so it's par for the course in today's America, where any perpetrator just automatically engages in DARVO these days.
Well, and that's exactly what he did. I didn't know that term until you taught it to me. But again, in one of my 3-minute rants against this man, in public, I basically put on the record that no, he was not the victim. He was the perpetrator.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway,
Other
I know
questions, comments,
this is way
discussion?
out of the direction of most talks here. So
Not
I'm
necessarily.
interested. Well,
Not necessarily, because it's still all about people talking to people with civility, courtesy, tolerance, and respect. So,
fair enough.
that's certainly the opposite of getting into gaslighting about gaslighting about gaslighting. So,
I'm sorry, I
they're
interrupted.
mutually exclusive.
Agreed. I interrupted somebody who was voicing, and I'm afraid I don't know who it was. Please
Uh,
try again.
Comments,
well,
questions from Adam, please.
All right. So, as someone who grew up in Southern California, which is also fire country for the most
Mhm.
part, I'd also like to second saluting you. This may be a bit of a tangent, but I'm no expert on the politics of firefighting, but I had read about an issue of local politicians in sort of wealthy neighborhoods wanting to sort of putting pressure on the fire department to call in helicopters or do other sort of showy measures, firefighting measures that sort of give a visual impression of things being done, regardless of whether it's tactically the best decision. Is that something you've observed to be the case? And do you think that the sort of local prerogative to engage in that sort of way may be one of the things that some people, some local politicians are trying to hold on to that
That's
are
an interesting question, Adam. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen that done, but despite the gray beard here, I've only been in fire for 7 years. So I got to this field rather late in retirement. Um, so I can ask more broadly with my more experienced colleagues, who are all of them my junior. Um, but what I do, let me offer you two things. One is that politicians, in my opinion, have no business making tactical choices and operational choices on fires unless they have that training and they can make a suggestion. But there are very clearly defined chain of command and who has authority to do what. So in there are two. There's really only one thing that puts out fire, apart from weather. Sometimes you get lucky in the weather department, but if you're being active, it's the people on the ground, the grunts doing backbreaking work, and it's hard because I've done it. That's what puts out the fire. The retardant and the water can slow things down. That gives you a space for the people on the ground to do the work, but it's almost unheard of to put out a fire from the air. It just doesn't happen, unsupported. Um, so showy helicopters, I'm glad when they show up. Trust me, because if you need helicopter support, you need it yesterday. The quarry fire that I showed in my first um, slide used, it grew to be about 150 acres, which is not that big, but it was near all kinds of houses, and they evacuated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families to do this. They had on this fire half of the air support for the entire state of Colorado. They were so worried. Our modeling showed that this thing was going to be in our backyard in a day and a half. We got lucky in the weather. The wind died down, and there was a little bit of rain. Um, so without the air support, I don't think they would have been able to do the aggressive moves that they made with backfiring. Uh, and it was a gutsy thing to have done, and it was done well. And I'm really proud of my colleagues for what they did. I was in Idaho on another fire, so I couldn't help them. But stuff from the air may make the voting population more comfortable, but if you're paying attention, that's not what takes care of the problem. Does that help, or am I dancing around your
well,
issue, Adam?
okay, thanks. That addresses it about as well as I think it's possible given how sort of unspecific the question was. I just wanted the this is just something I'd read about and I wanted the perspective of someone who'd had some firsthand experience.
I'll also tell you that California fire is done differently excuse me, addressed differently, fought differently in California than in most of the rest of the U.S. You have a very competent but group in Cal Fire. Um,
Mhm.
they they have there are issues around Cal Fire. Cal Fire is not a purely a force for good, but they do their job well. Most people are envious of them because, unlike me, when I go on a fire, I'm on a fire for at least 2 weeks, 16 hours a day. They work 24 hours and they get a day off. 24 hours, they get a day off. And they stay in hotels. I sleep on the ground. So, there is envy in terms of how they treat themselves, and they look really snappy in their uniforms. But if you speak to the feds in the state of Colorado, in the state of California, they do not like Cal Fire, and they don't like them in part because they're taking over small organizations such as where I work in Colorado. The important difference between Colorado and California is California actually owns a lot of land which is prone to burn. So you need to have your own firefighting force, much as the Forest Service does, and the BLM does, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs does, because they all own lands that have things that torch. So you need your own fire militia, for want of a better term. But things are done differently in California, and I don't have enough experience in California. I've been on 3 fires there, though, to be able to opine on the distinctions. It's a fascinating world. I'm still learning it, and really, fire is emergency response is about 2 things, and I should have said this early on. It's about public service, and it's about learning so you can do the public service better. That's what we do.
I had one quick comment, and I also wanted to thank you, Flip, for your service, because being a firefighter is hard work, especially the kind of firefighter who is out there fighting these enormous and more frequent forest fires that we're getting. The comment that I wanted to make was that most of you have never seen me in person, and I'm all of 5'1", and when I was in college, 92 pounds. And I was the chief of the fire department at my college, Bennington College in Bennington, Vermont. And the reason I got to be the chief is because I figured out how to drive the fire truck. The fire truck was from the 1940s. It was double clutch. And I knew how to drive clutch going in, so I could get it to go. And so my talent for driving this enormous old fire truck got me to be the fire chief. This at the time was a coveted spot because you got to park anywhere. You could park your car in front of your house, which was illegal. I lived on campus in a house, and I was the only one who could just park. So there was a
Well,
perk.
thank you for your service. Truly.
Well, fortunately, there weren't many fires on campus back when I was the chief because, honestly, they didn't trade us. I
Yeah,
could have gotten the truck there, but that was about it.
yeah, and that's not unique in volunteer organizations in the
Yeah,
U.S. But the departments where I work, since I'm working side by side with people who get paid to do it, if I
right.
can't do it as well as they do it, I'm in the way. I'm actually a liability. I'm not a help. So
Exactly.
they make sure that they get us trained at the same level. So I went through fire academy in my 60s.
Not an easy feat.
No, no, not an easy feat. And my classmates were old enough to be my children or my grandchildren if I had any.
Hmm.
So, but
I'm sure so.
it was a it was a great experience. It's the hardest thing I've ever done physically, and trust me, I've done some hard things
Yeah.
other than that. But
Well,
it's
let
enough of
let
my life
me
story.
thank let me thank all firefighters and all firefighters who are listening in and or watching this video at some time in the future. We're going to have to wrap this up in order to have at least a 2-3 minute break. But for those, I just wanted to throw out a question for people to think about. One of the reactions that I had listening to the talk and the Q&A and comments and discussion. Where, when, and how do we maintain control over chains of command in a way that serves the common good? And when does chain of command get corrupted, perverted, altered in a way that destroys common good? Doesn't matter whether it's a chain of command in firefighting. I unfortunately have seen some perverted, corrupted changes to change of command in emergency psychiatric services. When that happens, it's bad for everybody, and it certainly doesn't serve the common good. So the generalized question here is, how do we maintain appropriate chain of command for the sake of safety and the common good? I'll just leave that as an open question to be explored in the future. And I'm going to close the recording to take a 2 to 3 minute break.
And that's a great
And
question, Carl. That's a
yeah,
great
thank
question.
you, Flip. I really appreciate your contribution today to Guardians. And I love your Guardians of Sanity. And let's continue to promote Guardians of Truth, Integrity, and Sanity. Thank you. All right, 2 to 3 minute break.